Hi, my name is Thomas Dowling from Letterkenny IT, and you're all very welcome. So we're going to have a careers talk about computing today, and I'm not really going to talk about Letterkenny IT at all. I'm just going to talk about careers in computing. And if it's something that you think you're interested in, hopefully you'll look at our website and the information available on it to see if any of our courses are appealing to you. So just some general background information about the computing industry. At the moment, there's about 90,000 people working in computing, which is a pretty constant increase every year for the last 25, 30 years. There's about 5,500 IT companies. The vast majority of those are Irish companies and small and medium enterprises. And then there's a significant number of very large international companies. So for example, Ireland is the European headquarters of all 10 of the world's top computing companies. And you know the ones, Facebook and Google, Microsoft, so on. They all tend to distribute from Ireland, and they do a lot of their research and development and localization as well here. Huge challenge facing the Irish economy is the shortage of good technology graduates. There are never enough computing graduates. I came out of college in 1991. It took me 3 weeks to get my first job. I was never unemployed after that. I went from one job to the next job to the next job. And that's a very, very common profile, really, probably the most common profile for computing graduates, unless they decide to deliberately take a career break. At any given time, there's about 5,500 vacancies in the IT sector in Ireland. And that might fluctuate a bit given the economic circumstances. But what you tend to find about computing is that in good times, people invest in IT, and in bad times, they invest in IT in order to cut their costs. So computing tends to be remarkably resilient in terms of riding out recessions and stuff like that. So you'll probably have heard of the recession in 2008, well, you probably experienced it. And computing was probably one of the only sectors in the world that really wasn't affected to any significant degree at all by that. And in fact, by about 2010, the IT sector was really booming as companies reinvested in order to reorganize their businesses. So why would you study computing? Well, you've all heard about the excellent job prospects. That's a well-known thing. I've just mentioned it there, and it's all over the place in terms of the media, but there's a lot of other reasons beside that. So there's a wide range of careers which tend to be very flexible, interesting, well paid. And we'll come back to that in more detail in a moment. But just to say that computing is about a lot more than somebody says sitting in a room writing code. In fact, really only a small number of computing graduates do that kind of work. A qualification in computing is an extremely mobile type of qualification. Now, you don't have to leave Ireland. There's plenty of work here. But if you do want to travel the world, the big three degrees really are medical doctor, medical nurse, and computing graduate. They're the ones that tend to be the big shortage things worldwide. If you want to go to America, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, Saudi Arabia, wherever, most of them operate skills-based work policies, and your ability to get a work visa depends on kind of what skills you have. And computing is one of the big three in that sense. So you're at a huge advantage in terms of being able to travel, get employment, get work visas and stuff like that, which is really the only way you want to travel in terms of working in different countries. You don't want to do it illegally. One of the things that surprises a lot of people is that there's this picture that people have in their head of the person sitting in a room on their own, working away at the computer nerd. The reality is completely different. Computing is all about working in teams, and that ability to interact with people is probably the single most important skill that you will have as a computing graduate. So if you walk around companies like Primerica, Optum, Allstate, CETA, Gartner Technologies, or go down to Dublin, walk around a company there, one of the things you'll notice is it tends to be large open plan offices, lots of breakout coffee spaces and that. And you'll see people kind of sitting, having a cup of coffee with maybe sketch pads out, and they're sharing their thoughts, they're kind of brainstorming, and they're communicating with each other about where they are in terms of the project, so that everyone on the team is working together on the project and trying to create a situation where the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. if everyone is working together, different people have different strengths. And it's a really, really kind of sociable profession. So they're not interested in the person who's sitting in the room on their own, because no matter how good they are, what they're producing isn't going to work with what everyone else is working on. You need people who are going to work together. So what makes you good at IT? Well, work ethic, obviously, ability, obviously. You don't have to be a rocket scientist, just an ordinary person. Team spirit is hugely important. It's not about maths. There's a perception that computing is very mathematical, and that was true kind of 30, 40 years ago when computers were basically calculators used to solve maths problems, but it's not true anymore. In fact, you don't need honors maths to do computing. You just, a C or a B in past maths is absolutely fine. But you do need some skills that are generally associated with mathematics. So persistence, you need to be willing to kind of stay with the problem, because giving up isn't really an option, but that's true of anything in life. You need a degree of imagination. Computing is a very creative profession. If you don't solve it one way, you're going to have to solve it another way. It's one of the most interesting things about computing, really, is that there isn't kind of fixed solutions to everything. You have to bring your own imagination to it, and you can talk to your colleagues and brainstorm, but you do need a degree of imagination. You need sort of a problem-solving mentality, which is kind of really fun. I think it's one of the best aspects of computing. You need to like variety. Computing is not the same every day. It's the opposite of the same every day. Every day you have new problems, and you have to think up of new solutions. And as I say, you need to work in a team. I know I keep coming back to that, but it's just so important. So what types of jobs? This is one of the big selling points of computing. To me, it's more important than the number of jobs. It's more important than how well paid the jobs are. Is that there are a million different types of jobs. Software developer, that's writing computer code, database administration, technical writer, project manager. There's so many there. I picked those up off of jobs.ie in a couple of minutes, and it represents a tiny, tiny fraction of the number of jobs available. You might end up designing websites. You might, if you have an artistic kind of turn, you might end up doing content for games. One of our graduates, Danny McFadden, was the Chief Technology Officer for the British Antarctic Expedition. He was a real outdoorsy kind of guy. He worked on rural broadband here in Donegal before he took up that job, and he just loves kind of being outdoors and that. So it really depends on the type of person you are, and there isn't a sort of a single fixed type of person who does computing, and there isn't a single kind of fixed type of job that you do. It depends on you. And what the beauty of computing is that you will find something that suits you. It may not be your first job, but you will find something that suits you, suits your personality type. And that's a really big plus in computing, because a lot of professions are quite rigid. You go into doing something, so you start off as an engineer, start off as a fire engineer. It can be really hard to get into something else. But in computing, you're constantly moving around as new technologies come along. So at the moment, there's a huge demand for big data analysts. Now, 5 years ago, there wasn't, but this has become a new big thing. The emerging thing, which we'll talk about in a while, is artificial intelligence. There aren't a lot of people out there who are strong in artificial intelligence, so it means that it's up to people who are interested in that as a career to jump into it. So it's constantly changing, constantly evolving. There's just a huge, huge range of things you can do. So where might you work? Well, some of these some of them are possibly not quite as familiar. 8/8 is a software company in Derry. It's a local company set up by people from Derry and Donegal. Internatalia is a company in Donegal town. The local company set up by local people. VM Forensics is set up, named after a lady called Vivian Mee, and she does digital forensics, which we'll come to again in this computer security and digital forensics course. Cloud Ranger is a local cloud technology company which won the CoLab in Letterkenny, and it's very successful. It's expanding very rapidly. 3D Issue is a company you've probably heard of around Letterkenny. Zenmode is a local company. And then there's the big ones, Twitter, Uppity, Allstate, uh, which is based in Derry, Primerica, which is in Letterkenny, Facebook, which is in Dublin, Google, and Yahoo, which is in Dublin, CETA, which is in Letterkenny. And we have graduates working in all of these companies. And the common thread here among the companies that I've listed here is that they're just a small range of the companies that LYIT computing graduates are working in. And again, there are a huge range of companies and a huge range of different types of jobs. So what's a typical work-based characteristic? What would you expect to be kind of your experience when you go out working? Well, very common in computing, you have flexible working hours. Which, depending on kind of your personal situation, your family situation, that can be something that's very important to you. Comfortable modern environments. Remember, you're a skilled graduate. The company wants to retain you, therefore they're going to provide you with a nice place to work. They don't want you kind of getting disappointed in your working environment going off somewhere else. So, nice place to work. You can work from home. Of course, that's become a huge thing recently, but it's always kind of been a big thing in computing before, long before it became a big thing anywhere else. You can travel the world. For example, if we look at CETA here in Letterkenny, they employ about 6,000 people in about 40 countries around the world. And it's very easy to kind of move within the company from one country to another, and they'll sort out your work visas and your relocation and everything like that. Same with Primerica, just as a for example. But even smaller companies like Garden Technologies have operations abroad as well. So it's a real kind of big plus with computing if you do want to travel, but you don't want sort of the uncertainty of just going out there kind of on your own. It tends to be a relatively relaxed atmosphere. You know, it's really just about kind of, you know, your own ability to produce. Nobody's got a stopwatch over you. There's a lot of sitting around brainstorming, coming up with ideas, wondering about how you might get something done. It's very sociable because, of course, you're working in that type of environment. So you'll often see people under normal circumstances going off for a coffee at the end of the day, going for a drink, whatever it is. It's a professional environment. So again, you know, at all the status, the salaries and everything that goes with that, there's a lot of progression opportunities up through teams and all the other things you expect, pensions, healthcare, bonuses, all the things, you know, that are so important, even though it can be kind of hard to think about it at this stage of your life. So what are the typical emerging areas? Well, this is really, really difficult. And I spent quite a bit of time thinking about this. So general computing, always, because that's the majority of jobs. You know, you can go into things that are specialized like digital healthcare, data analytics, but a good flexible general computing degree will cover you under most circumstances for most jobs. You don't require a lot of maths, but you know, about 5 to 10% of computing jobs are mathematical, and it's hard to get kind of good computing maths graduates. So if you do happen to be good at maths and you're thinking about computing, that's great. It's not essential, as I say, for the vast majority of jobs, but it is a plus. So, you know, it's just something to think about if you're kind of have mixed skills in that respect. Big data analytics. Over the last 30 years, we've seen increased kind of collection of data by devices. And you've all seen this, you know, the ATM in the bank, or you pay for something with your Visa card, you're getting a cup of coffee, your bank closed, whatever. All those systems are collecting data. And more recently, we've had a lot more sensors. So when you park your car, there might be a sensor recording the fact that the car is now in the parking space and when it pulled in and when it was left and the average length of the time it was there, things like that, what size of car it was. We have sensors all over the place recording the level of the river, recording the quality of the air, recording the the temperature of the weather. And there's just millions and billions of pieces of data being created. And in the last 5-10 years, the big thing has been, yeah, but what are we doing with that data? Because for a very long time, we were doing nothing really with that data. It was just all being captured and recorded, but that was it. So the huge thing these days is big data analytics, which is looking into that data and looking for patterns to see what it will teach us. So a very, very simple example. If you have monitors on the level of a river. So you might fit them under the bridge. If there's a storm and the river level rises upstream, then there's a pretty good bet that give it an hour or two and the river level will rise downstream. So you send out your council workers, they check all the gullies and that, they make sure that there isn't trees stuck under the bridge. They make sure that that everything is in place to avoid heavy flooding. That's kind of one example. If you're in, say, a company and you've something like the trends in terms of sales of different products, are they going up and down? If they're going up, maybe you need to order more of them for next year. If they're going down, maybe you need to order less of them. Again, very, very simple examples, but you can see the idea. There's much more complex patterns hidden in there, which can be very difficult to find. But if you can find them and if you can understand them, they can, as a business person, they can give you huge, huge advantages over your competitors. Artificial intelligence, you've all heard of. Now, I kind of really should put artificial intelligence in. We're not talking about human intelligence. What we're talking really about is the ability to look at patterns in data and to make kind of semi-intelligent decisions. But there's no emotion in there. And really, despite what science fiction would tell you, and I love science fiction, there is no real prospect of computers being able to kind of have emotion in the foreseeable future. It's a really difficult thing, and people don't even really understand why people have emotions. So it's really hard to create a computer that has emotions. But the systems look smart. They appear to be smart because they're looking at the patterns in the data, and it's kind of an extension of big data analytics. And they're trying to make intelligent or semi-intelligent decisions about what's likely to happen next. So you don't have to wait for somebody to say, look at what's happening with the water levels in the river upstream. The system can automatically look at it and kind of say, look, there's something here. We need to ring the the county council. We need to tell them this has happened. We need to tell them that something's going on. And the system makes that happen rather than having to kind of wait for human intervention. Or it might just flag it to a human to get the human to do the intervention. So again, that's a very, very simple example. I mean, these things can make very complex examples, but pure intelligence is sort of a different thing from what we call artificial intelligence, but it's a very, very exciting field. So you get it in health and life sciences. So for example, it could spot a pattern in somebody's blood pressure or heart or something and say, you know what, you haven't had a heart attack yet, but I think you're about to have a heart attack based on the data that I'm recording from the sensor in your watch. Maybe now is a good time to go to the doctor to have a heart attack. Some smart cities, if you're running automated kind of bike rental systems, maybe, sorry about the background noise, maybe you need to have the bikes kind of at the inner city bus and train stations in the evening when people are going home, and in the morning you need to have them further out when people are coming into the city. Manufacturing and industry. So for example, you can cut the amount of power consumption dramatically if you manage it more effectively. You don't want to be generating more power to your power stations than you're actually likely to be using at that particular time of the day. And there's lots of factors, like if the weather is colder, you'll need more power and so on and so forth. If you're in California and the weather is hotter, you need more power for the air conditioning. So two different reasons, same result. Depends on where you are. You need to monitor your environment. You need to understand it. So there's a lot of data going on there. Computer security and digital forensics is a huge area. As we gather all this data, there's a huge amount of value in it. And of course, there's a huge amount of confidential data there. So we need to be protecting it. And the consequences of not protecting it adequately are very serious. You may not have you may not be insured if you don't have a proper data security plan. You may be liable to prosecution for not securing the data properly. So it's really important to companies that they protect their data. Computer security is about the physical protection of your IT systems to try to stop people breaking in. And digital forensics is about accepting that security is not perfect. Ultimately, the right person, either through intelligence or through persistence or very often through sheer blind luck, manages to break into your system. How did they break in? What did they do? Is there evidence about it? Did they do any harm? Did they steal money? Can we identify the evidence and secure it so that we can deliver it in court? What digital forensics is. It's kind of two sides of the same coin. In terms of employment, there's about 1.5 million people worldwide working in computer security, and that grows at about 90 a year. There is nowhere even close to that number of computer security graduates coming out of college. So there's always absolutely red hot demand for security graduates. And often, what you tend to find is that people are kind of going into these roles that are not really adequately trained for it. For example, we do a lot of upskilling through our MSc programs to teach people who have general computing backgrounds but not security backgrounds to work in computer security. Because I say, again, there's always a shortage. There's a demand for new graduates, there's a demand for experienced people who want to reskill. Healthcare innovation and technology is a huge kind of emerging field. It sits very much at the intersection of information science, computer science, healthcare. So for example, I mentioned there the watch, there's a little sensor in it. It's monitoring your blood pressure, it's monitoring your heart rate, and it's detecting the fact that there's a problem. So you don't have to have a stroke, you don't have to have a heart attack, you go to your doctor. You don't need to spend an hour trying to describe to your doctor what was wrong with you and why you think there's nothing wrong. And I know my blood pressure's fine now, like it was really high yesterday. The doctor simply takes the watch, downloads the data. They can see all of the data that's there. It's nothing subjective about it. And they can go, do you know what? I think really we need to send you up to the hospital because it really looks like you are building up towards having a stroke or a heart attack. And in doing that, you save the healthcare system an absolute fortune. You obviously have huge benefits for the patient who you get early interventions, or rather than a kind of a catastrophic health event, you manage to head it off before it happens. And then you help people monitor and adjust their lifestyle, for example. And again, the data is being gathered, and the doctor doesn't have to listen to the story about the fact, well, I'm eating almost nothing and I'm still putting on loads of weight, because the doctor's looking at it and going, yeah, but you're not doing any exercise, you know. So the system is giving the doctor much more sort of real information than I think often the patients probably give the doctor, and that allows the doctor to make much better decisions. And that's a really, really big emerging field at the moment. So that's it for careers in computing. I've only really touched on a tiny fraction of the types of things that we do in computing. And it's impossible really to predict what the future will be. Will it be virtual reality? I don't know, but you can see opportunities available, and it's a fantastic field. And if you decide to go into computing, I'm absolutely confident you'll have a great career. You'll really enjoy yourself. You'll work with brilliant people, and you'll work for great companies. So I really
And
recommend it.
Thomas, I'm jumping in here. Hi, everyone. Fiona, Schools Engagement Officer at LYIT. If someone was interested then in choosing LYIT, just I suppose highlighting, we have the 3 level 7s and then a number of level 8s. Do you want to specifically just kind of give them a bit of an overview of the new level 8 in computer science?
Yeah, so if you do the Leaving Certificate Computer Science course, or if you do kind of its equivalent in terms of A levels, then you can do the 3-year honors degree in computer science. It's the only one in the country. And I suppose you might wonder why it's the only one in the country, and it's really because we're one of the best computing departments in the country. We have over 1,000 students, really incredibly good national and international teaching staff. And that's a really good course, and it's proving to be really popular. We just started running it last year, and first year out we had really good demand for it. It's a general computing degree. We also have applied computing, which is a general level 8 computing degree, kind of with a specialism in computer software. There's a 3 ordinary degree in computing again, which is a general degree with a 1-year add-on for an honors degree. Not everyone chooses to do the honors degree. The employment situation is really strong, and often what people do is they leave at the end of the level 7. They get their work, and they come back then afterwards part-time and they do an online honors degree. So because the online or the honors degree is important in terms of long-term career progression, even though you don't need it to kind of get your first job.
Yeah.
Um, and then after that, we have an honors degree in artificial intelligence and AI. We have an ordinary degree in computer security and an ordinary degree in computer games. But all of the degrees have a lot of core computing. So you're not kind of boxed into doing one thing. You have a lot of options with your degree.
And if anybody is looking for more information or want to know about the CAO codes, all of the programs that belong to the Department of Computing are LY, and they begin with the number 7. And for instance, in the computer science program, it's LY748 on the CAO. But if you go to lyit.ie and click on undergraduate programs and then filter computing, you'll get the full list of the level 7s and the level 8 choices on the CAO. Okay, so for now, we're going to stop recording. If you've any further questions, you can email thomas.dowling@lyit.ie or fiona.kelly@lyit.ie.